Let's begin. Threats in puzzle position are: Queen takes knight. Knight takes pawn.
Checks in this position are:
Queen to c1, check. Rook to a1, check. The best move in puzzle position is: Queen to c1, check. King to h2. Rook to a1. Let's see the next puzzle. The threats are: Rook takes pawn, check. King takes knight.
The checks are:
Rook takes pawn, check. The best move in puzzle position is: Bishop to c4. King to h7. Bishop takes rook. King takes bishop. Rook takes pawn, check. Let's continue. Threats in puzzle position are: Queen takes pawn. Rook takes pawn, check.
Let us look at checks in puzzle position.
Queen to e3, check. Queen to c1, check. Rook takes pawn, check. Rook to e1, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Queen to e3, check. King to h1. Knight to f2, check. King to h2. Knight to e4. Another one. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are: Bishop takes pawn. Bishop takes knight. Knight takes knight. Bishop takes knight.
There are no checks in this position.
The answer is: Bishop takes knight. Bishop takes bishop. Bishop takes knight. Bishop takes bishop. Knight takes bishop. Next, puzzle position vulnerabilities are: There are no threats in this position.
Checks in puzzle position are:
Queen to c8, check. Queen to f5, check. Queen to h5, check. Answer to this puzzle is: Queen to h5, check. Queen to h4. Queen to f5, check.
g4.
Queen takes pawn, check.
Another puzzle.
The threats are: Queen takes bishop. Knight takes knight, check.
Here are the checks:
Knight to c6, check. Knight to d7, check. Knight to f7, check. Knight to g4, check. Knight takes knight, check. Knight to d3, check. Knight to c4, check. Answer to this puzzle is: Knight to d3, check. King to f1. Queen takes bishop. Let's see the next puzzle. Here are the threats: Bishop takes knight.
There are no checks in this position.
Answer to this puzzle is: Bishop takes knight. King takes pawn. King to e6. Another one. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are: Rook takes pawn, check. Queen takes pawn.
The checks are:
Rook takes pawn, check. Answer to this puzzle is: Queen to d4. Rook takes pawn. Rook takes pawn, check. King to f1. Rook to h3. Queen to b7, check. King to g6. Next, threats in puzzle position are: Rook takes knight. Queen takes rook. Queen takes pawn, check. Rook takes rook. Rook takes pawn.
Checks in this position are:
Queen takes pawn, check. Queen to c1, check. Rook to b1, check. Solution to the puzzle is: Knight to f4. Rook takes rook. Knight takes queen. Another one. Threats in puzzle position are: Knight takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn. Rook takes pawn. Rook takes queen.
There are no checks in this position.
The puzzle is solved using: Rook takes queen. Rook takes rook. Knight takes pawn. Let us go to the next puzzle. The threats are: Knight takes bishop. Knight takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Pawn takes knight. Queen takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn.
There are no checks in this position.
The best move in puzzle position is: Pawn takes knight. Bishop takes pawn. Knight takes bishop. Let us go to the next puzzle. Here are threats in puzzle position. There are no threats in this position.
Checks in this position are:
Knight to f3, check. Knight to e2, check. The best move in puzzle position is: Knight to e2, check. Queen takes knight. Bishop takes queen. Another one. Threats in this position are: Bishop takes pawn. Queen takes knight. Queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes rook, check.
The checks are:
Queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes rook, check. Solution to the puzzle is: Queen takes rook, check. King to h2. Queen takes bishop.
Another puzzle.
Threats in puzzle position are: King takes bishop.
There are no checks in this position.
Here is the solution to the puzzle. King takes bishop. Knight takes pawn, check. King to g8. Let's see the next puzzle. The threats are rook takes rook. Queen takes rook.
There are no checks in this position.
The best move in puzzle position is rook takes rook. Queen takes pawn, check. King to f7. Another one. The threats are queen takes rook. Queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn.
Let us look at checks in puzzle position.
Queen takes pawn, check. The answer is knight takes pawn. Rook takes knight. Queen takes rook. Next puzzle. Here are threats in puzzle position. Pawn takes pawn.
There are no checks in this position.
Here is the solution to the puzzle.
g5.
King to d3. King to b5. King to c3. King to c5. Let's continue. The threats are knight takes pawn. Knight takes pawn, check. Knight takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn. Queen takes pawn.
The checks are
Knight to c7, check. Knight takes pawn, check. Solution to the puzzle is queen takes pawn. Next,
let us look at threats in puzzle position.
Queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes pawn.
Checks in puzzle position are
Queen takes pawn, check.
g4,
Check. Answer to this puzzle is queen to f4.
g5.
Queen takes pawn. King to h6. Queen to f6, check. Let us go to the next puzzle. Threats in this position are bishop takes bishop. Knight takes pawn. Bishop takes knight.
There are no checks in this position.
The answer is bishop takes bishop. Queen takes bishop. Knight to e7. Another one. Threats in this position are rook takes pawn. Queen takes queen. Bishop takes pawn.
There are no checks in this position.
The answer is queen takes queen. Knight takes queen. Bishop to b3, check. King to f1. Bishop to c4, check.
d3.
Rook takes pawn. Let's continue. Here are threats in puzzle position. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Rook takes pawn.
Checks in puzzle position are
rook to f2, check. Rook to g1, check. Rook to f2, check. Answer to this puzzle is rook to h2. Queen takes rook. Rook takes queen. Let's see the next puzzle. The threats are bishop takes knight. Knight takes pawn. Queen takes pawn.
There are no checks in this position.
Here is the solution to the puzzle. Bishop to d3. Bishop takes knight. Pawn takes bishop. Queen to d5. Bishop takes knight. Queen to e6. Bishop takes bishop. Let's see the next puzzle. Here are threats in puzzle position. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes knight.
Checks in this position are
queen to f6, check. Queen to d4, check. The puzzle is solved using queen to f6, check. King to b1. Rook to h8. Queen takes rook, check. Queen takes queen. Let us go to the next puzzle. Here are the threats. Knight takes pawn. Rook takes rook, check.
The checks are
knight to g6, check. Rook takes rook, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Knight to d6. Rook takes rook. Rook takes rook. Bishop takes bishop. Knight to f7, check. King to g8. Knight takes rook.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.